Welcome to Navigating IBD with Stephanie A. Wynn, where she tackles the real challenges of living with Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. Whether you're newly diagnosed, supporting someone with IBD, or looking for better ways to manage your care, this is your space for honest conversation, practical guidance, and community. This podcast exists to change the narrative, one story, one strategy, and one breakthrough at a time. So join Stephanie as she navigates IBD together with you. Y'all ready? Let's get started.
We are back. We are back for another episode of Navigating IBD with your host, Stephanie A. Wynn. And I'm super excited because we have an amazing guest in the building today. I met Mike at Johnson & Johnson Healthy Voices Patient Advocacy Conference. And it was so funny because I was in the room and someone asked, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Oh, I'm from the Tampa Bay area." And Mike's wife, Heidi, said, "What part of the Tampa Bay area?" I'm like, "I'm from St. Pete." She's like, "So am I." So it was so amazing to see that there were people from your area that was at this conference. And it was a conference with a lot of patient advocates from all different industries and backgrounds. And so Mike Vassallo, he is a patient advocate whose life changed with the shocking diagnosis of non-muscle invasive bladder cancer at the age of 46. By day, Michael is a high school assistant principal, and by night, he's a passionate digital health advocate. What began as a search for information turned into a global community when Michael started documenting his treatment journey on social media in April of 2024. And through a powerful mix of education, data, humor, dancing, and honesty, his videos have reached patients across the U.S., Canada, and the U.K., and Australia, offering awareness, relatability, and hope to those navigating cancer. So, Mike, welcome to the show. I'm super excited to have you here. Introduce yourself.
This is great. I thought it was crazy that I had to travel all the way to New Jersey to meet someone who practically lives in my neighborhood that is a health advocate as well. So it has been so great meeting you and getting to know you. But yeah, I'm here, and I love that. Me opening up and talking about my experience with bladder cancer has opened the doors to new friendships, new relationships, and a community of people online that, some of them turn to me for advice, but we really all lean on each other. And I think that is so valuable, especially when you are in a dark place and battling cancer or a chronic disease or some other illness.
So, Mike, receiving a cancer diagnosis can be life-altering, right? Can you take us back to the moment you were diagnosed and share what pushed you to turn your personal journey into a public platform for advocacy?
That moment was a lot. And it was kind of compounded. We were actually near the holidays. My wife and I are both educators. And as you lead up to the holidays, you're in a relaxed mood. There's holiday parties and you have the like gift exchanges and things, and you're getting ready for the holidays. And we actually went into the portal on like the Thursday before Christmas, and I had a biopsy. I'd been through a CT scan, and my wife called me and said, you need to read what's in the portal. And I didn't know the words that were on that page in the portal. There were a bunch of them I had to look up in Google, but I did recognize the word carcinoma. And it was really a kind of an empty space. You're going into the holidays. We have kids. We want to be able to celebrate. And here we are now not being able to talk to a doctor until after New Year's. It was a really weird thing. So we got our appointment moved up to January 2nd. I went in the day after New Year's and met with the doctor. And it's like one of those experiences you have in a movie where like you're sitting in the room with the doctor, but you slowly sort of kind of tunnel back and you almost feel like you're like looking down on yourself from above, sitting there with the doctor, like having this, it was like an out of body experience almost he said the word cancer, and we were all kind of confused. I'm not a smoker. I'm not of the age of someone who typically has bladder cancer. And so it was a dark place that we were in. And you are in that dark place partly because you just don't know what to expect. You don't know what the journey is going to be, and you don't really know what resources to reach out for.
Thank you so much for that. And that leads me to my second question. So your content blends facts, data, humor, and even dancing, right? Which is not what people traditionally expect from cancer advocacy. Why was it important for you to show up authentically, and how have you seen that approach resonate with patients who may feel isolated or afraid?
When you get the cancer diagnosis, you take inventory of your life. And I certainly did, in the first days, not knowing really a lot about the type of cancer, you have crazy thoughts like, what if these are my last months or years? How much time do I have left? And what am I going to do with that time that I have left? And I feel like because I was an educator, because I was a school administrator, I felt like I had to kind of have this buttoned up persona all the time that there were children that were watching, there were parents that were watching. I didn't want to give them the wrong impression or that I was unserious about the work that I do as an educator. But I do have this side of me. I was a theater kid in high school. I sang, I danced, I acted, and I wanted to use those skills. I actually, I also was on a spiritual journey at the same time. And I said to God, I said, if you can get me through this, Lord, can use me as your vessel to help others. And so I wanted to use my ability as a speaker, to talk about cancer, to educate others, to show people the experiences. What does a treatment look like when I go for treatment? What are some of the things I'm experiencing live in the moment? Because that was really things that I was looking for as I went onto social media. I was trying to look for others that were giving that type of content so that I could see what a treatment day looked like. And I didn't see a lot of that. So I felt like maybe this is a void that I could fill in. So as I started doing my videos and talking a lot about it, I had some former students of mine reach out and comment on things. And one of them said, of course, Mr. Vassallo, you're going to use this moment to teach us. And so I started to realize I was reaching people. And then people dug back on my TikTok, and there were some videos that I'd done with my kids. And they said, when you feel well, you should dance again. And I thought, you know what, that's a goal. And I think when you're going through a struggle, you have to kind of celebrate the small wins and find things to look forward to. And so I got to the point where, like, when I finished my first round of treatments, it's immunotherapy that we call BCG. I'm not even going to pronounce what BC and G are because I can't. Vassallo something. But when I got through my first round and I was feeling better, I made a dancing video, and people were like, "I'm so glad to see you celebrating, this little milestone." And then I had a surgery, and then after the surgery, when I was better, I found an opportunity to dance, and I found that, we live in darkness with a chronic disease or with cancer, but when you can show people that there is light in there, I think that speaks volumes to those who are just beginning the journey, to say, okay, maybe I can be like this guy and I can get to the other side of this and feel well enough to dance and make funny videos. But I also have the educational piece as well. And I think that I come naturally to that because I am an educator.
I just started showing like the loss of my baby. Like I lost a baby during this, two daughters, through this journey. And it was like, oh my gosh, like I was devastated. And so the little milestones, like when this condition, when I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, for those that are just new to hearing us, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease in 2017, but nobody could tell me like what to expect. And like you said, you start researching and seeing if there's somebody else out here that is going through what you're going through. And at the time, I didn't find anybody. What I did find is that there were only a certain group of people who were diagnosed with this. And I was like, that can't be true, because it's affected me. And so, but yeah, that is so good that you turn and you have to turn the negative news into positivity, because negativity lingers longer than positivity, right? And so when you are able to get up, that's why for me, when you said like, if I when I had a test done and I got through that test, if I got through the treatment, I would do a dance. If I had the strength, like, yes, that same thing for me. Like if I stopped walking. So one of the things was I was so bedridden that I couldn't walk. I stopped eating. I was so weak. And I remember I said, I will walk again. God, I will walk again. If you just help me, I could walk again. And I would walk from my bed to my bedroom door and back to the bed. And so I just kept telling myself, I will walk again. I will drive again. It's like you celebrate those moments. I know it sounds small, but you celebrate those moments. And when you get there, that's why the work that we do, Mike, is so vital. It's not just for us. It's for the people who are going through this, the people who need the support, who aren't strong enough to do the work that we're doing. Which leads me to the third question, right? And this is all about, this is a message of hope, because there is hope out here for those who are dealing with a chronic illness. So many of our listeners, Mike, whether living with inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, or ulcerative colitis, cancer, or are caring for someone or are navigating uncertainty right now, what message of hope would you leave with someone who's early in their diagnosis or struggling to see what's next?
First of all, I believe in the power of positivity. I believe that it is directly linked to our overall body health. The mental health is just as important as your physical health. So my message, especially in the area that I am with bladder cancer, the treatments that exist are rather archaic. They involve injecting your bladder with that BCG solution, which is essentially part of the tuberculosis virus. And so you're just like with chemotherapy, you're injecting a germ, you're kind of doing damage to your body to try to kill the cancer. And that treatment has existed for 40 years, and that's really been the only treatment. When I was presented with treatment options, pretty much either that or we're going to take your bladder out of your body. But I think there are a few things that are coming down the line. That there's a lot of attention right now to bladder cancer, and there are a lot of developments. There are a lot of new treatments that are being developed. There's a lot of energy and funding behind it, and so particularly for bladder cancer, I'm very excited about these new treatments. They look a lot more tolerable to someone who's going through bladder cancer treatments. And I also look to others that are in the bladder cancer space, and I think one of them, although I hate to see anyone get diagnosed with bladder cancer, I think one of the biggest shot in the arms to the bladder cancer community was when Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, was diagnosed. And I try to share very openly with what I do, but he is, with all of the flamboyance and swagger that he had as a football player, he is using that as a bladder cancer advocate. He's not ashamed to walk around and show you his catheter bag that he was wearing at times. He talks, he has a porta potty on the sideline. He talks about how he has to wear Depends sometimes. He's extremely open about it. That's been so encouraging to others in the bladder cancer space, because when you have bladder cancer, and a lot of also what you deal with Crohn's, these are parts of the body you don't talk about. It's impolite to bring this up over dinner conversation. And so the more that we can break down and put these conversations out there for people so that they really have an understanding of what a bladder cancer patient goes through or what a Crohn's patient goes through, I think that gives them hope, and in that they feel that they're seen. But just in general, it's the positive attitude that I have, and that I can be an example, and I see you as an example of someone who has gone through this journey. When you're sitting there thinking back to that moment where I was having the out-of-body experience, you're sitting there thinking like you're in a dark place. You don't know how this is going to go. How's my lifestyle going to change? Am I going to live through this? And to see someone who's gone through it and is on the other side of a lot of it. I'm still going through treatment. You still have to battle every day. But that you can live a life, that there is a life, that you can find joy, that you can find happiness, and that you can do normal things that other people do again. And so I feel like hopefully I can project that to people who are in the battle.
This is the part of the show where we leave our audience with a tip for advocating for themselves, right? If there is someone who is recently diagnosed with bladder cancer, what would be your advice to them? What would be one thing that you would like to get? What tip you would like to give to them?
That is a great question. First of all, I will also note I have an incredible advocate by my side, and my wife, who was an incredible patient advocate. The healthcare system can be difficult to navigate. There's a major cancer center here in our area, and I go there, and it's got a great reputation, and it is a fantastic place. It saved my life, but it's a busy place. There are a lot of patients who want the attention of the doctors. And so I always brought someone with me, mostly her. We always had questions going in. We made sure that we got our questions answered before we let the doctor scrub out and leave the exam room. And we were not afraid to ask questions, whether it was in the portal or to call the nurses. And early on after the diagnosis, my first appointment was supposed to be a month and a half away from the diagnosis. And we took it because that's what they had available. And my wife continued to see me battle. I would go through school days and I would come home and I would say, there are 7 periods in the school day, and I went to the bathroom 10 times. I had to urinate because my bladder was so irritated because of the symptoms that I was having. And, one day I called her on the way home. I said, I don't know how many more days I can do this. I'm like, this is hard. And, she obviously felt my emotions, and she called the cancer center. And one of the nurses there said something to her I had never expected a nurse at a cancer center to say, but she said, call every day. And my wife, so what? She said, call every day. She said, your husband's in distress. I can tell you're in distress. You guys need to be seen. We have cancellations, and we will not be annoyed if you call every day. Call every day and see if you can get this appointment moved up. And so she literally did. And she got me moved up. I was in there within 2 weeks instead of a month and a half. And for me, that was huge. So don't be afraid to advocate for yourself in this.
You gotta speak up for yourself, and you gotta ask questions. If you don't understand the diagnosis, that's what the doctor is there for. The default when you go to a doctor's appointment and they tell you or they give you a diagnosis, the default is to nod your head, yes, that you understand what they just said. To only get home, and that's when the light bulb goes off, and you ask yourself, well, what did they just say? I don't even understand what they said, because you're so in such a shock that this can't be happening to me, right? And so, as you said, Mike, we definitely got to advocate for you. And that's a part of advocating for yourself, which is asking questions. And I tell patients this all the time. Go in with at least your top 3 priority concerns. The top 3. You may have a list of 10, but those top 3, get those answered while you're in the office with the doctor, and utilize the portal, the patient portal.
I really thought with the portal, you put in a message, it might take a day or two for them to get back. The nurses we had were extremely responsive. And sometimes that's a much faster way to get the information than to call and be on hold and press 5 and, everything that you go through. It was very useful. Sometimes just for that real quick yes, no question that you needed to ask.
So what if listeners that are tuning in wanted to stay connected with you and follow your work?
My primary channel is TikTok. That's where I started. And so on most of the platforms, I am Mr. V, spelling it out, MisterVee, and number 3. So that's me on Instagram and on TikTok. And then I also have a Facebook page where I am just Mr. V. and you can find me there as well. And I've joined lots of bladder cancer forums and try to chat with patients and caregivers that are asking questions in those. So I'd love to interact with you. Send me a DM.
Yes.
I'll answer back. I have this lived experience. There are some variations of bladder cancer that I haven't experienced, but I've also met a lot of other advocates where I can go, hey, you know what? I've never had that, but I know this other person who has.
Again, I really am so grateful to the opportunity to interview you today and have you on the show. We have to bring Heidi back so you both can do it together.
Yes, that would be great.
Yes.
And I just want to say thank you for inviting me here and giving me this platform to talk a little bit about bladder cancer. And I just want to say that I met you as a person from St. Petersburg, but as I got home and I started to look things up, you are a rock star in your community. And I thank you for all that you're doing for IBD and your community. It was funny after I met you, and then I'd see people come up to you, like everybody to know you at Healthy Voices, and you have a lot of connections, and you do great work, and I can see why everybody wanted to come up and talk to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that, Mike. Listen, we're out here doing the work, and the work doesn't stop. Our goal is not just to talk about it, but to bring our advocacy to the forefront for those that need it the most. And so I thank you so much, Mike, for being a guest on our show. I am your host, Stephanie A. Wynn, and this is Mike Vassallo coming to you live on Navigating IBD. Until next time, peace. Thanks for listening to Navigating IBD with Stephanie Wynn. If you're ready to take the next step in managing your IBD, grab a copy of Navigating IBD, a 6-week blueprint for better gut health at navigatingibd.com. It's filled with practical strategies to help you understand your symptoms, manage your flares, and advocate for the care you deserve. Until next time, keep trusting your body and moving forward. Peace.